Welcome back, everybody, to another Danny Phantom review. Today we're talking about the episode Identity Crisis. So the plot of this one, Technus is loose again and causing havoc. I like how they do this, though. They remember that the last time we saw Technus, they had trapped him in the video game, which is called Doomed. The whole video game Ready Player One episode, which is a really fun episode, although extremely dated. So when Danny's clearing out some files on his computer, he accidentally deletes his copy of the game, which causes Technus to become loose, and he manages to infect the Fenton RV. We get a fun redesign of the character. That's another thing I like about whenever Technus comes back. He's always trying to evolve with technology and become more powerful, and so we get a new design of the character every time he shows up. So Danny is really frustrated because he wanted to spend the weekend just hanging out, but now he has to deal with Technus, and so he decides to use the Fenton ghost catcher, which just looks like a dream catcher thing, which we saw in a previous episode, on himself to split himself in two so that he can be in two places at once. And so we get this fun episode about Danny Phantom and Danny Fenton being split into two different people. We get to see the two aspects of his personality, although much more exaggerated because they don't have the other aspects of Danny to balance himself out. So we get a lot of fun moments with the ultra superhero Danny. He wears a cape.
And it's a no on the cape.
I think it's cool.
Take that off. It's disrespectful. Spider-Man doesn't wear a cape.
His hair is always blowing in the wind somehow. His dialogue is super cheesy, even more so than the show normally is. And then regular Danny Fenton with no powers just wants to chill out and do nothing. So they explore the concept of, I wish I could be in two places at once, the whole having to balance real-world responsibilities with the responsibilities of being a superhero, what makes Danny who he is, all those kinds of questions. There's been stories that are very similar to this that have been done in Spider-Man a few times. And yeah, ultimately we see that it at first is really successful, but without both aspects of Danny's personality, he's not as successful at either aspect of his life. They do a good job of keeping the premise interesting throughout the episode, as halfway through they try to switch him back, but now there's just two Dannys that can both switch back and forth between Danny Phantom and his normal self, Danny Fenton, except that also only some of their powers transfer. So again, Danny has to figure out how to work together with the other side of his personality in order to defeat Technus and save the day. It's a really fun episode, not a whole lot to it. I like that both they remembered what happened to Technus the last time we saw him. They brought back the Fenton Dreamcatcher thing that we saw in a previous episode and explored the implications of that device in a greater context, which I think is cool and interesting. Although I feel like they could have done a little more with this episode. It's a good episode, it's very fun, but it's extremely lighthearted and goofy, and I wish they kind of explored more of the aspects of Danny's personal life a lot more. In the episode, he just kind of wants to spend time with his friends, which is fair enough. You need to take downtime every now and then as well. But it would have been nice to see an actual real life problem of having too much going on in your life. Maybe he also has a school assignment he has to work on. His parents are making him do chores or something. There's some big social event he wants to go to, but all these things are overlapping on top of having to fight Technus. Then the motivation to split yourself in two would become much stronger, and we get to explore those ideas in a much more interesting way. And the prom is tomorrow. They never did that. That would have been a fun thing to do in this one as well. They even specifically state that as one of the core concepts of the show in this episode.
My ghost fighting life and my personal life are always interfering with each other.
And we don't really feel that much pressure, unlike a lot of other episodes that focus on those pressures a lot more. Still a fun episode. I think they could have dived a little deeper into the character stuff and those real world struggles of having to balance too many things at once. There's this really cool comic book style sequence where the screen splits in two and we see both Danny fighting ghosts and Danny just hanging out, living a normal life. And it's a cool sequence. We see how those different situations parallel each other, and it's very easy to read as well. This is something I might want to talk about further in another video of some kind, but I'm often fascinated by how movies will sometimes try to adapt a comic book style paneling within a movie or TV show frame. And the biggest problem with trying to implement that comic book style into a different medium is that with film, things are happening in a linear fashion in a specific amount of time, and so you can only really look at one thing at a time, even if there's more than one thing going on in the frame. So when you have multiple frames within the same shot, it can be very easy to lose track of what you're supposed to be paying attention to. Anime actually figured out how to do this successfully years ago. You'll often see this kind of reaction shot where there's multiple characters reacting to the same thing at the same time, but the way that you'll often see it is that each character's reaction is revealed one at a time, so you always know where you're supposed to be looking. Spider-Verse does some interesting stuff with this too, like this sequence here with the Prowler that seems really complicated, but it gradually reveals new information from left to right, so it's actually very easy to follow. I'm way off topic here. The point I was originally trying to make was just that this Danny Phantom sequence works really well, because even though there's multiple frames, you can still follow everything that's happening because they both parallel each other. It's really clever. There's a scene where they go to the movies, and the movie they're seeing is called Twins 2: The Revenge, which is a funny title. I think they were actually working on a Twins sequel at one point called Triplets. I don't know if that's still happening or not, but then it also works thematically because the episode is about there being two Dannys at the same time. Yeah, but that's about it. I talked for way too long. But it's a fun episode. I liked how they remembered the continuity both with Technus and the Dreamcatcher device, but I wish that they played with the premise of Danny being split with two a little more. We got to see the responsibilities of his normal life explored a little bit more. Yeah, that's about it, so we will see you next time.
Danny Phantom.